This is the House of Hockey podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network. Hockey is more than a game, it's a lifestyle. It's you, the diehard supportive fans, your favorite players who are on the team you cheer for, and the organization who supports them.
The companies that make your gear, bags, and beer league sweaters. The hockey moms and hockey dads, and everything else that makes this House of Hockey your home. Come on in. I'm Breezy.
And I'm Rae Rae.
And this is our house. Welcome back to the House of Hockey podcast. I am your host, Breezy.
And I'm your other host, Rae Rae.
And we are here. We're kicking. We're alive. We're doing it.
We are alive. We, as far as we know, are free of the virus, but we haven't been tested. I haven't been tested. Have you? I
haven't been tested.
Exactly. So
I self-diagnosed myself one time.
That you did or didn't have it?
I got sick. Well, it was actually our first episode. Yes. Remember, I was like, we talked about it. We're like, all right, let's start our first episode, this and that. And then like the next day I was like, I have a sore throat. And you're like, I have a sore throat. And then I was down for the count for like 4 days. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay. And I was like, did I have it? Did I not have it? I don't know.
I don't know. As far as we know, we're going to just go with ignorance is bliss on this situation right here. And because we're abiding by the rules of quarantine, and yep, we are not infecting others. And I'm wearing a red bandana every time I go out to the store in public. I'm washing my hands. So, we can just say we don't have it. So what?
Yeah, we do not have it.
No. Have you learned anything about yourself in this quarantine, Breezy?
Well, I have learned that I really enjoy staying home. I really enjoy it. I like to just hang out, and I always have a happy hour, usually around noon. So yeah, I think I've just learned that I'm perfectly content being home. How about you?
In the same way, I'm like the introverted extrovert type where I really like being home. I feel way less anxious knowing that I don't have to do anything. I mean, I have a ton of stuff to do, but I don't have to run and go somewhere. I don't have to go do this and try to get this done, get this done, and get that done. And I'm like turning down virtual happy hours with people. I'm like, I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. Like, I only like seeing you in real life, like every once in a while anyway. Like every Friday, I don't want to have to talk to you. I only talk to you when I want to talk to you. And today I don't feel like it, so I'm not gonna. But I do, let's see, what have I learned about myself? Yeah, I mean, I do like being home. I like my space. I like quiet. And, I like to get stuff done when I want to get stuff done.
Are you like a list person? Like, do you have to like write a list and then like check it off? Or are you just kind of like, yeah, I know I have stuff I got to do?
No. I have a list here. I have a list on my phone. I have a list on my Google Gmail.
Daily planners.
Oh, yeah. Lists everywhere. I have to. I run very anxious, and the lists really help me get it out of my head because I've like written it down, and I know that it's written down and that it's there and that I won't forget and I won't not do it. But lists are my friend. Same for you, huh?
Same for me. I'm very like goal oriented, I would say, and I plan out my day just because I obviously have my own business and I deal with multiple clients. So like I try to put the same amount of effort into every client that I have each and every day. So like I have to make sure I'm like, okay, I got to get the same amount done for every client for the most part. I'm going to go from head to toe, boom, 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 check it off as it goes. And it just helps me stay focused. And it makes me feel like fulfilled almost, like I did a good job today. So sometimes you just need to tell yourself that.
That's true. It gives you the instant gratification of like knowing and
Yeah,
seeing what you've done and
right.
knowing like I did something for myself and my business today, and to put that check mark on the box and go, ah,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Well, I always taught, well, I heard once upon a time, and then I always kind of taught it to myself that there's not such thing as being busy. You can be
Mm,
busy all you want, but if you're not productive, then you're not doing anything with your life. So I always want to make sure that if I'm spending time doing something, that I'm being productive about it and I'm not just wasting time away. So
I
that's my motto.
I would agree with that. I find sometimes I can be like a little distracted trying to do too many things at the same time. And
Right.
then I don't feel fulfilled, and then I don't feel like I've done anything. And then I get mad at myself because now I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get anything done, but I was busy all day. What the hell was I doing?
Yep.
So sticking to my list and like having some bit of structure is good, but I've gotten a lot better at sometimes life throws shit at you, as we all know
Yep.
right now. And I've
Yep.
gotten better at going with the flow of like, okay, well, I had a whole plan, I had a to do list, but X happened. And so now all of that has to go out the window and we have to readjust. And I actually do really well with that sort of thing, crisis sort of adjusting to chaos. I would say that has to do with my days in news, working in local news as a producer, where like you spend 8 hours of the day putting together an entire hour-long newscast. I've written everything. We've had 1,000 meetings about what we're going to do today on the newscast. And then breaking news happens 5 minutes before the show. And everything I've spent 8 hours doing goes out the fucking window and it
Oh,
doesn't matter. And you have
oh
to
boy.
like not have that attachment to
Yeah.
everything you just did. And so I
Right.
really learned that in my time there. But other than that, like productivity levels, I mean, I'm doing well. Like doing productive things like ordering a new hockey stick for
Yeah.
my continual learning to play hockey in my apartment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know we're, let's see, my stick will probably have arrived when this episode comes out, round two,
Okay.
hopefully. The
Yep.
street hockey stick I've ordered will be here, and it will be not child size,
Right.
and I can resume my coaching with everybody on Instagram who's offering me such wonderful advice. And I've been doing some live coaching on there on at the Hockey Lady, and
Right.
it's sure is fun for people to watch, I think, because I am a complete beginner. But anything else aside from that, I mean, I'm definitely having to learn how to cook. I am not a cook.
Not a
Like
cook.
I can
Not a
do
fan.
I can do like four things, four dishes. But now that, we're in quarantine, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
having to like kind of figure out like flavors and stuff. And that's an interesting process because I eat burnt chicken if I have to. So, I
Well,
mean,
I started
what about
my
you?
own website, cooking website. Well, I put my recipes out there to help anybody who needs like a quick meal. But for the most part, you need to have a smoker or a grill because that's how I cook. But I'm not much help for you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have a grill or smoker.
Yeah.
I have an oven and I have a toaster oven.
You know what? You could do pretty much all this stuff in the oven. I'm gonna give you the link
Okay.
and you could pick something.
Well, tell everybody what the link is if they're listening and they're like, I want Breezy's recipes for her smoker.
I mean, it's pretty amateur right now because
Doesn't matter.
I need I need way better lighting for my photos. So I am taking a photography course. So
Cool.
that's my new thing. So I could try to up my game for multiple reasons. But yeah, it's at Breezy's Barbecue Chicken or not chicken. What I'm hungry. I don't know if you could
It's
tell.
my fault because I was talking
Yeah,
about burnt chicken.
you said chicken. It's Breezy's Barbecue Kitchen
Kitchen.
on Instagram, and then it's just that.com. So yeah. So do you have a
Check it out.
signature dish?
Girl, no. Signature dish is burnt fucking chicken. I mean, I've actually stopped cooking chicken altogether. I don't even buy raw chicken because it's overcooked, dry, and tastes horrible. And so I don't even cook it. What I do is I buy a roasted chicken from the grocery store. I think I maybe said that before, but I buy a roasted chicken
Yeah.
and it's perfect. It's juicy, it's flavorful, it's delicious, it's cooked perfect every time.
Yeah.
And then I just, make vegetables and stuff. I'm a better sous chef, if you will. Like I
Okay.
can I can cook a couple things. It tastes fine. It's not bad. It's not good. It's not like, damn, you should be a chef. It's like it's fine. It's
It's
fine.
fine.
It's
It's
fine.
fine.
So what's your favorite thing to meat to brisket? What's that's not the right lingo. The verb. What's the verb I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Like the right
Uh,
meat to prepare. There we go.
prepare. I'm a big fan of making tri-tip. I'll just be real with that. I make mighty
Which
good ribs.
which animal is tri-tip?
It's cow.
Pigs or cows?
Cow.
Cows.
I'm
Okay.
not a big pork eater,
Okay.
except for bacon, because bacon's obviously delicious, unless you're my sister-in-law and hate bacon.
I don't know
How
how
does that
you could
happen?
I don't know how you hate it.
She like refuses to eat anything that has bacon in it at all.
Something wrong there, I think. I'm just gonna venture. Something wrong, maybe, okay, something wrong with her taste buds. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no. Yeah, tri-tip's great. I made some smoked bacon this morning for breakfast, which is
Ooh.
absolutely delicious. If you've never smoked bacon on your smoker to eat, obviously, because I don't know what else you do with it. You don't throw it away unless you're my sister-in-law. It's delicious. Absolutely delicious.
Okay.
But
But
yeah,
yeah, to
so
stay inspired, you're doing a lot. You're taking photography classes.
mm-hmm.
I did bake. I baked like a basic bitch banana bread, but like a healthy version
Okay.
because I had all the ingredients so I could do it. But I had chocolate chips because you gotta have a little chocolate in there. But I
Right.
started watching Great British Baking Show on Netflix, and
Oh,
I just like the British accent. And I was a little concerned though that I was gonna want to eat like all of the sugar in my house
yeah,
watching this, but
right.
it's kind of getting me inspired to want to bake. I do like to bake and I can bake. Cake balls are my signature, I would say.
Ooh,
Red
cake
velvet
balls are good.
cake balls are my masterpiece. But yeah, I mean, I'm just doing all the things.
That's what you got to do. You got to be productive and keep your mind and I was going to say juices, but that sounded weird. Keep your mind going.
Yeah, and I'm like working out the Peloton app, the bicycle,
Mm-hmm.
the spin bike. But I don't have
Yep.
a spin bike, but their app is free for 90 days, and they have strength training, yoga, meditation, full body, like the whole
Wow.
works. And I really like their instructional like strength courses. I have a couple like lightweight dumbbells, and so
Uh-huh.
I do that. I try to do something every day to keep that helps keep me sane. Work some kind of physical exertion, exercise, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Well, I've also been trying to maintain inspired, and I spend a lot of time on Instagram.
Uh huh.
And the other day, I did something,
What?
and I think it's a confession that I
Uh
have.
oh. Are we
And like,
are we doing like MTV style confessional like on the Real World or Jersey Shore? Do
yeah,
it. Do it. I want you to do it like that.
okay. Wait, hold on.
So like how
I'm
you're
trying to remember.
like they're in the confessional and they're
Oh
like
yeah.
telling the story. Like okay, I'll be like the producer off air.
Okay.
So tell
Okay.
me what do you need to confess, Breezy? What did you do on Instagram?
Yeah, so the other day I had a couple drinks in me and I was like, I'm gonna be back on Instagram. I need to get inspired. Sometimes having like a nice like cocktail will like really like, you get some confidence sometimes. And that's something that I need to like push me over the edge to like really go get what I need, right? And so I had a couple drinks and I was on Instagram and I was like, you know what? I've had enough. I've been DMing Justin Bieber so much to watch a Maple Leafs game with me. I'm just going to ask him to come on the podcast. So I DM Justin Bieber asking him to come on our podcast. It's a good one. He hasn't responded yet. But I included Haley Hales, my girl, yes. His wife. I love her. She's a Rangers fan, but now she's obviously a Leafs fan. I would love to talk to her. You know, yeah. Screw Justin. I want to talk to Haley.
Okay, that's fine.
But, I guess
so wait, did it say the message was read?
Let me look.
You know how like you can see if it says, or seen, it says seen on Instagram.
Yeah. Oh, I hit him up on Hunks of Hockey because I had more followers there, and I thought he might read it.
That was smart. No, this is good business.
I have a new DM.
You have a new DM? Is it from Justin Bieber?
It's not from Justin Bieber.
Damn it, that would have been gold.
It has not been read yet.
You know what? I support this, and I don't think there's anything wrong with what you did. And I would love to have Justin Bieber on. And it's interesting that you share this story because I didn't know you did this.
Yeah.
I, the other night, made the decision in my head, and I was going to text you, but it was late. And I was like, I don't want to wake her up. I didn't know. And I was like, you know what? God damn it. You know who we're going to get on this podcast? We're going to get Carrie Underwood on here.
Hell yeah, we are.
She's going to be on here. We need to like get a hashtag going, like Carrie on the house, or Carrie in the house, or I don't know. We
Carrie, Jesus take the wheel, bring the house down.
That's a long hashtag, but we'll go with it.
It is a long one.
But I decided, I thought, you know what? I really love Carrie Underwood, and I've talked about her a whole bunch on this podcast, and I'm looking for our 1 degree of separation to her, to connection to her. And why can't she be on our podcast? Why can't she?
Absolutely.
So, Carrie, if you're listening, we would love to have you on and talk about being a WAG to a NHL player and life as a mom and a singer. We love you, Carrie. I love you. Do you like Carrie as much as I do, or is it just me?
You know, I think you probably like her more than I do, but I did see her in concert. It was great. She was fantastic. I was a fan when she was on American Idol. I voted. That was probably one of the only times I voted on American Idol, except for Scotty McCreery. I love Scotty McCreery. It took me 9 years to see him in concert, but I did recently. Well, we have a little bit of a roundabout that we could do to get to Carrie.
How?
So Mike has a company called Catchin' Deers.
Okay.
Their address is online. We can mail a letter.
Let's do
old
it.
School style.
Yes.
And then that's like from our heart.
Yes.
And then maybe one of them, maybe Mike's brother, will go over to their house and say, "This is so funny. We got a handwritten letter for Carrie to go on a podcast." Maybe.
I'm here for it. Let's do it. Let's write this letter in Google Docs together. We're going to mail it, and we can drop our 1 degree of separation of people we know who can vouch for us,
which is now 2 people.
2 people. We are very close. So if anybody,
so basically a half a degree away.
Yeah. If anybody has any connections to Mike Fisher or Carrie Underwood, get in our DMs at House of Hockey Podcast on Instagram and let us know how you can help us get her on the podcast.
There we have it.
We got to do it.
There we have it.
Okay.
We're going to do it. All right. Well, I feel like I need a confession from you. I just dropped the JB confession.
Here's like a true confession. I was raised Catholic. I don't practice anymore. And when you first go to confession, when you're in 2nd or 3rd grade, I thought, I'm not telling this guy my sins. He knows my dad. I know him. I go to church every Sunday. What if he tells the teacher? I can't trust this guy. And so I lied. I lied in confession. And I didn't tell him any like true sins. I was like, you know what? I'm going to just make this shit up. And I'm like, I was mean to my brother and I didn't listen to my parents. And He was like, all right, 2 Hail Marys and Our Father. And I was like, thanks. My friends were like, you're not going to tell him? I'm like, hell no. Like, I didn't say hell at that time. I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not telling this guy, this priest, are you out of your mind?
Oh,
No
man,
way.
That's funny.
As like a little kid, that was my rationale. I don't really know what that says about me, and I'm sure more people are going to be praying for me tonight. And you know what? That's just fine. I'll take prayers. But yeah, so I don't have anything to confess.
Oh, all right. Well,
No,
that was very anticlimactic.
I
Just
know. I'm
kidding.
sorry. Yours was way better. I think we've got to just get to our interview. So, what do you know about ice hockey in the UK, United Kingdom? I know very little about it other than it exists. And so, to talk about it with us is the father and son hockey podcasting duo, Shane and Fin Rae. They are the hosts of the UK Hockey Fan Podcast. Welcome all the way from the UK. Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much. Hey, guys. Thanks for having us on.
Of course. Yeah. Now, tell us, where in the UK are you guys?
So we live really near Oxford, which is a place most people, I suppose, will have heard of. And Oxford itself is only about 40 minutes drive from London.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your podcast. Give us a little bit of a background. So when we're not in quarantine and dealing with a global pandemic, you guys typically are a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast, because you're actually from Canada, but you live in the UK now. So tell us that story and how that all came about.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll start if you want, Finn.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So we're a Canadian-British family, and I grew up in southwestern Ontario, not far from Toronto. And we've been over here for quite a long time now. And Finn's been growing up here, so he's the one with the British accent, and I'm the one with the Canadian accent. And and we originally started out with a web radio station. And so we had all this kit and stuff from, we used to do, we ran our own web radio station, not sports related. And I've always been a hockey player, and Finn got into hockey a few years ago, and we decided to switch from the web radio was sort of dying and podcasting was happening, and we thought, well, let's get a podcast going, and we'll do it about something that that we're both really passionate about, and the natural thing was hockey. And so we started a couple of years ago. I think we've just done our 40-odd episode or something like that. Wow. And so we do love the Leafs, but our podcast is actually just about hockey in general, although we do tend to talk a bit more about the Leafs than anybody else because they are the best.
Yeah, we came around the idea of a podcast ages before we even started it, but then we ended up just one day just talking about hockey just for like an hour or two straight. And then we decided we have all this gear anyway, so we may as well just start up a podcast and just put it out to people to give everyone more of a UK viewing on things. And it's just kind of gone from there.
Nice. So how popular is ice hockey in the UK?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So actually, when you're here and you follow a team, it's like following a team back there. There's loads of fans. There's a couple hockey towns here with big arenas and things like that. You can go to a game and you could be watching any team in something like the OHL or AHL, well attended and that sort of thing. But the really weird thing about hockey here is you're either in it or you're totally not in it, if that makes sense. So if you're a fan, and you could be a total crazed fan of a team like the Nottingham Panthers or someone like that, but if you're not into ice hockey, you literally know nothing about it. You have no idea it's even happening in your town.
Wow.
That's funny.
It's really bizarre. It's really weird. And hockey here is absolutely a marginal and niche sport, right? Especially from a pro point of view. And we know why this is. And we talk about it. We've talked about it on quite a few episodes of our own podcast. And it comes down to one thing and one thing only. And that is access to ice. Mm. Oh. And so basically here there's rinks are really few and far between, right? So we looked this up before we came on tonight.
Thanks. This was a big question.
Yeah. So how many rinks? We'll ask you guys. We'll throw a couple questions back to you guys too. How many rinks do you guys think there are in England.
Like the whole of the country, or just in that part of the country?
The whole of the country. Have a guess.
I would say 6.
I was
Okay.
gonna go with like 5, but I don't know.
Is
Well,
it too low?
You're going to be pleasantly surprised then. There are actually 24 rinks in England. Now,
Okay.
but check this out. Keeping all things in perspective, 24 rinks in England, the country of England, right? And England's population is 60 million or something like that, is it?
I don't know, something around that.
Suddenly, we should have looked that up. There's a
Okay.
shed load of people here. Anyway, 24 rinks in the whole of the country. Now, where I come from in Ontario, so one province, like a state, right?
Mm-hmm.
One section of the country, there are 750 arenas, and in total ice surfaces, there is 1,050 in Ontario.
Holy
Wow.
crap.
So that gives you an idea. And so we went further. We looked this up. Rinks in Canada. If you had to guess how many rinks there were in Canada, go high.
Like
I'll say
10,000. Yeah. A million.
A million.
This is like The Price is Right or something. You guys were massively too low, and now you're massively too high.
Yeah.
So it's 3,300 like sort of rinks where you could play an official game there, and that probably doesn't include like ice pads and practice pads and all that sort of thing. Now, how many rinks do you think there are in LA?
There's
Probably
only
a lot, because I mean, hockey out here is growing. So I would say, I mean, I know off the top of my head,
2,
gosh,
3,
probably
4.
at least
There's like
50.
really?
I
So
would think.
So we couldn't really nail down the exact figure, but what we got was something like 25 official sized rinks, and then any number of practice pads and that sort of thing. So it could get to around 50, right? So that's in the city of LA. So coming back to England, 24 rinks in the entire country.
Wow.
So that's where the problem starts with the sport of ice hockey here. And you know, if you, depending on where you live, it could be hours and hours to the nearest ice rink. So you know, even at the amateur level, if you want to follow a sort of mid-range semi-pro team or whatever, where it's only like £10, the equivalent of like $20 to go and see a game, you're still looking at like a 3-hour drive to go and support that team or whatever, because the rinks can be so few and far between. So that's one of the reasons why it's such a niche sport here.
And does it also have to do with the fact that, as far as actual land area mass, there is also, I mean, you have a big population of people in a smaller sized, like, you know, square mile area of your of a country too, right? Like there is only so much room there to put in a giant arena.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the funny thing is that you'd think that because geographically it's a really small country, that it would actually be way easier. So I grew up playing minor hockey and whatnot in Canada, and I am one of those guys that has memories of spending my life on a crappy old school bus for, 10 hours to a game and that sort of thing, and then play that game and drive 10 hours back home without stopping in a hotel or anything like that. Now, so you'd think geographically, the UK being so small, that would disappear, right? But the problem is that there's so few rinks that the problem's exactly the same. It's still, miles apart. So Finn, who's in the minor hockey system here, his games are, his last game was a 4-hour drive each way to play and that sort of thing, inside of England.
So you really love your dad then, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I owe a lot.
And it's funny because, of course, it's such a niche sport that you find a lot of young guys who are in the minor system, their dads do actually play. And there's a huge amount of Canadian and American families over here. And so on a lot of minor league teams, you'll find a combination of a sort of a hardcore of British kids, surrounded by loads of Canadians and Americans, and then Finns and Swedes and all the sorts of European countries that would be hockey countries.
So tell us a little bit then about sort of the NHL version of professional hockey there. It's called there's a couple and there's been some
Yeah.
transitions. So the most current popular is the Elite Ice Hockey League. That was in
Yeah.
2003. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Elite League is the main league right now, but then you've
Okay.
also got the National Ice Hockey Premier League, I think it is, like the NIHPL, I think. And then you've got, as you go down, you've got the NIHL, which has like 2 divisions. So we basically have like the same kind of tier system as in North America, but we have like we have this main league which everyone usually knows about, and then as you go down, like it's like barely anyone unless you're really from the town and really know it. That's kind of the teams down there, you know.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and it's a not a huge league, and so like so many, if you imagine the history of some of the sort of farm leagues around North America that struggled and burned out and went bust, and then sort of reinvented themselves somehow else, that happens on a fairly cyclical basis here, where a league will just, you know, an anchor team will collapse and the league will go, and then they'll fight like hell and reinvent themselves the following year and reemerge as another league. And they've somehow managed to keep it together. But the elite league itself, so the top flight of hockey here, their equivalent of sort of their NHL. Have a guess at how many teams there are in that league? Remember, 24 rings.
Well, I cheated and looked. So Breezy, you guess.
Go on.
You know, I probably should know this, but I'm gonna say probably 10.
Yeah, bang on. 10 teams in the current league that unfortunately just collapsed when all the rest of hockey stopped. But yeah, so there's 10 teams, and I'm just looking at the list of them here, and some of them, of course, hockey becomes more prolific the further north you go as well. So if you think about Great Britain, it's essentially a long, sort of skinny country, a bit fatter at the bottom, and goes all the way up to the likes of Scotland and the mainland. And so the further north that you get, the more prolific hockey is. So the real hockey towns, like something that any of us would recognize as the hockey town with a proper big, well-supported arena and a pro team, they become more prevalent the further north that you get. And so I've talked to people that know more about the UK leagues than I do, and more about the history of things. And this actually is down to global warming. And so way back, even decades ago. So they've had ice hockey here for decades.
Right. Is that because of like ponds, like the pond sort of situation? Like the further north you go, the you can play ice outside if you didn't have an arena kind of thing?
I think that's definitely the case. So hockey's a winter sport, right?
Right.
And so same with, if you look at European countries where it's prevalent, there are usually countries that have a proper winter. And so in the north, like Scotland used to have ski areas and things like that, and all of them have closed down because they don't get any snow anymore. Wow. And so you find hockey's really well supported in Scotland, and you think about the Olympics, so they're really big into curling and things like that. So they've always had ice rinks, right?
Right.
And so Scotland is huge into hockey. And then coming, a bit south of that, you've got Sheffield here, which is a huge hockey town. It could be just carved right out of any sort of medium-sized town in North America somewhere. And, and then all the way down to sort of the middle of the country, where there's like Coventry Blaze and Nottingham Panthers and all these sorts of things. And then slightly out and into Ireland, you've got the Belfast Giants, who are essentially up north, and that sort of thing too. And so the further south you come, the less prevalent hockey is. And word is because up in the north, they used to get a proper winter here.
Well, speaking of Scotland, they obviously have their team. They're the Glasgow clan?
Yeah, Glasgow clan, formerly known as Braehead clan.
Braehead, right. Yeah, I actually, I made friends with one of the players a couple of years ago. So I kind of know a little bit about them, but who would you say is like what did you say the Ireland team was?
So they're the Belfast Giants.
Okay, so would you say that the Giants and the clan are probably, the biggest rivalry?
So I would say yes, for sure. They're in that. So the top teams usually in the league that have been fighting it out for certainly the past few years are Belfast Giants, up the north, Glasgow Clan up in the north. Then you've got Sheffield Steelers, who also are in the north of the country. and then really oddly, the Cardiff Devils from Wales. And so all of these places have like a proper big, nice arena and whatnot, really well-supported clubs. Belfast is probably the most interesting story because Belfast Giants, the reason that they have hockey is, and I learned this because I went up to Belfast recently and did the open top bus tour. And
okay.
Like the big red bus, that they do in like Hollywood and Manhattan.
Exactly that. Yeah, I was up there for work.
It must have been a little cold, huh?
and so it turns out that, so you know about everybody knows about the Irish Troubles, right? And remember, we're talking about Northern Ireland here, which is where all the Irish Troubles were, with the IRA bombings and all that horribleness that happened, in the 70s and 80s and all that sort of thing. Anyway, at the end of all of that, the government said, right, let's make a major investment in some sort of sporting venue. And but what we want to do is we want to try and pick a totally fresh sport that neither side of the Troubles is already invested in or attached to. And so they chose ice hockey. And so they built this amazing, huge rink, and it's built right in the old shipyard where the Titanic was built. And
that's so cool.
It's a totally awesome, amazing arena. And in the bottom of it, they have this huge sports bar, and it's a Canadian-themed sports bar.
Because of course it is.
That's it. Yeah. And you can buy like there's little trucks around that sell fast food, and they sell poutine.
Oh my God.
Ooh, that sounds so good right now.
These guys have like totally embraced the whole hockey thing. But interesting, right? Like, how they ended up getting ice hockey there.
Hockey bringing Ireland together,
Yeah, peace through ice hockey.
Peace through ice hockey. It's because they leave it all out on the ice, So some of the teams that you were just mentioning, would you say, so since those have like the most proper stadiums and clubs and support, are they therefore the most popular? And who do you guys cheer for?
So the most popular teams are probably the Cardiff Devils, the Belfast Giants, and the Sheffield Steelers, because they got all the biggest rinks. So they have the biggest fan base because most of the people from there will go and cheer because they're bigger kind of towns or cities. And the best team right now, and it's the team that we cheer for, and they've just won, the Sheffield Steelers. And they've done really well this season. And yeah, so it's been really good.
How did you guys pick them? Like when you got there, like how did you decide like that's our team, outside of the Leafs?
So I think correct me if I'm wrong here, Finn. I can't remember.
No, yeah,
I think it's because so as I mentioned, I was in Belfast for work, and I was also in Sheffield for work at one point, and so I play for a team around here. And because I was working in Sheffield for a year, I'd spend most of my time during the week up there. And I started playing for a team up there, not the Steelers. Obviously, those days are well behind me. But I was playing for another team that was that played at that rink. And so I went along to see a Steelers game, and I was just blown away at how, you could walk through the door of their rink. And for me, it was like just being teleported back home for a night, because it's not only hockey, but the atmosphere is exactly the same. If you imagine every single song that you'd hear in between the action, in between the whistles, they use all the same songs. They start the games off with the hockey song by Stompin' Tom Connors, and all the sort of songs that you expect to hear, and they just sort of recreated the experience exactly. And so anyway, Sheffield was the first one that we sort of knew about properly that was in the Elite League, and then we sort of stuck with it.
Nice. Would you say that the arena's pretty, I know you said it's pretty much like the same thing how any other NHL is, but do they have any kind of weird, things that they do that are not like NHL, arenas?
Yeah, so they do, I don't know, do they do something called Chuck-a-Puck there? Like they have
so I've never heard of Chuck-a-Puck.
So it's pretty, the games are pretty much the same, right? So they have somebody involved in those leagues has been across obviously to North America and have seen pro games, and they've just recreated that experience. And as expected, people that like hockey just go crazy for it. because it works, right? So in the intermissions where you'd have like somebody shooting from center ice to try and score on a little hole in the goal or whatever for a prize. So they do something here called chuck a puck, where everybody gets a puck with a number on it. You throw it onto the ice, and if it lands near a cone, you win and stuff like that. So
they do this. Where did I see this? They did this in Anaheim. They did this when I went to the women's, the US versus Canada game. It was like for charity. They got like a foam puck and everybody wrote their number or their name or whatever. And then they throw it and whoever gets it closest to the center dot like wins whatever, a signed jersey or something, but they did it for charity. So I think I know, is that the same thing?
That is exactly it. That is exactly it. So even that is not unique.
No, but I had never seen that at an NHL game. That was like something the women's team had adopted. Breezy, have you ever seen that at an NHL game?
No, I haven't at all.
I think the problem with the NHL is that to my mind, when I think about the logistics of the rink, it's like plexiglass and then net, right? And I don't know how you would chuck a puck over that situation. So it's in smaller rinks where you can actually chuck a puck onto the ice somehow, basically. But the rest of the experience is pretty much the same, right? It's really similar, and there's like 50-50 draw in between everything else. And they even have like, if a couple of these big teams in the Elite League have a proper big old Jumbotron and whatnot, not all of them do. Some of them have just literally a sort of old school scoreboard. But even the ones that have Jumbotrons have like Kiss Cam and all that sort of thing. So it's really like just a night out at the NHL. It's awesome.
Oh, fun. That's cool. Do any of the teams have something similar to like, say like the Red Wings when they throw an octopus on the ice or anything like that?
So they chuck teddy bears on the ice and stuff, but I think that's an NHL thing.
Events, that kind of
thing. That's for a special charity thing. I don't know that I don't know of any like weirdnesses like that are unique to the team. There probably are some, but I just don't know.
Yeah. Well, are the games televised on TV at all, or?
They sometimes are. So we don't have like a proper like sports channel for these kind of things. We have something called Free Sports, which is where sometimes they'll put like a game on like midweek if they don't have something else taking up the slot or whatever. And that's really the only way that you can ever get it. And sometimes the team put like a paid stream that you can pay for on their website. Just like kind of like a link thing that you can like put on your TV or something.
Gotcha.
That's really good things. I
think the difficulty with that is obviously that if you think about the money that's tied up in sports broadcasting and whatnot, and so that's all comes from, the reason that you and I or anybody else can ever see an NHL game on the TV is because some sponsors have paid for advertising space, right?
Right.
And the sport's not big enough here, so nobody will do it. And so they try to, of course, it's a catch-22, right? Because there isn't a big enough audience to justify anybody paying rights to broadcast it, but you can't get an audience unless you can get the game out to people that don't turn up at the rink or whatever. So what some teams have been doing is they get their own cameras set up and they'll try and do a live stream over the web or whatever.
Oh no!
Like the Steelers, we can catch a game from them. They live stream most of the games, and you've got to like go online and you pay like the equivalent of about $10 to watch it from your house and whatever. But as you can imagine, it's nothing like the NHL. It's like stationary cams and whatnot, and you'll see like the puck will go past, and then you're waiting for it to come back. It's like, oh, there it is again.
I mean, can you even see the puck on that broadcast?
You can. I'm probably not doing them justice. It's not as bad as that, but it's like community TV. You know what I mean? Rather than super pro. So no, it's a too small a market.
Yeah. Now, when you guys are at the games, so I know that obviously football, aka soccer, is probably the most prevalent sport there. And there's a lot of really distinct cheers at the soccer games. I'm going to just say soccer, so I don't. That's
it's best.
I'm American. What do you want from me? So we're going to call it soccer. But there's a lot of very specific chants and things like that. Now, does that translate into hockey? Because in the you've been to NHL games where it's like, let's go Hawks, let's go Leafs, like the same sort of chant exists for all the teams. But I know in soccer, they're very different and very distinct. So how does that apply to hockey in the UK?
That's a really good question. Do you want to have a go?
Yeah, I'll take this. So when you think of like a football or soccer, you think of like all these things almost. I feel like most of them are almost insults to whoever they were playing. But when it comes to hockey here, they're usually around the same as if it was an NHL or OHL game. They're usually kind of generic, saying like "Let's go Steelers" or something like that. And it's more, the hockey here is more the same in most ways as it would be in North America. And then the chants aren't really the same as football. I don't know all the chants specifically, but I know most of them, of the games that I've been to, have usually just been some kind of variation of what it usually is,
Yeah, so soccer fans have a really bad rep, right? And it's well deserved. We've been to loads of soccer games too. And you don't find it in my experience, you don't find it in any other sport. So if you can imagine, there's other really big sports here, and none of them have that same sort of thing. Like Finn's saying, it's usually their chants are not supporting their own team; they're doing down the other team, which is crazy, right? And so I was going to ask you. So we looked this up too. Most popular sports here, Canada, and the States. Most popular professional sports. So I'm going to give you the first one in the UK. It's obviously soccer. Mm-hmm. So what do you think the second most popular, or any of the most popular ones are?
I would say rugby.
So rugby's up there. It's number 3.
I would say tennis.
Tennis is up there. Number 4. You guys are doing well. You missed out number 2 though. It's a huge British sport.
Cricket?
Curling.
Yes, cricket's number 2. Well done. We're already at the top 4. And I was flabbergasted when I found out what number 5 was. You'll never guess it. I'm going to tell it to you. It's badminton.
What?
I love badminton.
So we're at badminton. Number 6. I won't put you through it. I'm going to tell you. Number 6 is swimming. Number 7 is athletics. Number 8 is rowing, and number 9 is where you get into hockey. Ice hockey, that is.
Not even basketball, football, or baseball makes that list, but hockey does.
None of those even make the top 10. So that again gives you an idea of how marginal the sport is here, and why there's no money in the game and that sort of thing. And so it barely scrapes into the top 10 of the most popular sports here. Now, when we looked up the US, what do you think number 1 is? You probably know.
It's got to be football now, and then baseball.
It's football, then baseball. You're right.
Basketball,
then
hockey.
Basketball. Hockey's number 4, right? And so there you go. That's the fundamental difference right there. And so you've got hockey being one of the top 4 most popular sports in the continent of North America, and here it barely scrapes into the top 10. And as you can imagine, the audience gets smaller and smaller, and it gets dramatically smaller as you drop down the 10 to the bottom of the 10. So that's it. But what made me think of it was when you're asking about the chants from football and whatnot. So they're really into the cricket and rugby and all this other stuff. None of that stuff has that horrible nastiness to it. They just love one another. You go to a rugby game, and whoever you're playing against, the other team, you're all arm in arm and cheersing and everything else. It's all fun and great.
No,
it's only soccer that does that.
No, I do not support that. We should not be friends. We should be, hurling insults at each other. We should be chirping the shit out of each other at the game. That's too nice.
Well, it's funny because I went to also, again, another work thing. Rae, you know that I work in media as well. And so I was in New York. And so I took some colleagues from here to a Rangers game while I was there. We were there for a couple of days. Rangers were playing. I'm like, oh my God, you all have to come to see the Rangers with me. And not one of them had even seen a hockey game on TV or anything. And they're like, oh, is it that game where like they have fist fighting and whatnot? And I was like, oh yeah.
Yes.
And they're right. So I took them out to a game. And, so talking about, it being, a real rivalry or whatever, everybody was so nice. And we were playing against the Senators, and we, meaning the New York Rangers. And so, but nobody cared, right? Everybody's just like, who cares? We're like just all in this building, and there's hockey here. And, And I really loved it. And sure enough, that particular game just delivered it all. There was great, lots of goals scored, loads of fights, and you don't get that anymore, right? So there's no guarantee of any fight in a NHL game, but it was just perfect, brilliant. No rivalry, just a great night out.
That's awesome. Now, I have a few more questions about the UK, sort of the leagues. So is there a most popular player, like a Sidney Crosby or a Connor McDavid or a Patrick Kane like version? And then are there any rivalries besides the ones that Breezy had talked about with Belfast?
So
And
I'm not sure if there's like a favorite player. I know that because the sport isn't big here,
right.
Some people just end up just supporting whoever is like really good on GB. So for example, we in Britain we have Liam Kirk, who's currently playing with the Peterborough Beats in the AHL. So most people, if you follow GB hockey at all, which is mainly the only kind of hockey that quite a lot of people in this country will follow if they follow it at all. And so I'd say probably him, because he is like the best that we have to offer, kind of thing. And he's played on the GB team, and if anyone in this country has seen a game, most likely be the GB game, especially the World Championships.
Yeah, so we skipped right over talking about Team GB. So there's obviously, Great Britain. The big news is that they qualified for World Hockey, the World Cup, Hockey World Cup, and or Hockey Worlds. And so it was an amazing thing, right? I think it's the first time, or certainly the first time in a really long time, that they actually qualified to play in the tournament. And it was a real nail biter because France also made it, or was in the tournament. And you guys probably won't have followed these two teams because your mind would have been focused on the likes of America, the States and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But way down at the bottom of the table was the UK and France battling it out to stay in till the next one, because they were both looking at like they were going to get relegated out. So they both managed to qualify into the tournament, and they were both scraping at the bottom of the tables, and it came down to them playing against one another. And whoever lost was getting relegated out, and whoever won is in for the next Worlds again. And GB won, was it?
I think it was 6-5 in OT.
6-5 in overtime.
Whoa.
It was like huge thing here, right? That would have been totally missed by most Americans and Canadians and stuff like that, because all this scrapping out was happening at the very bottom of the table. But anyway, so coming back to who the popular players are, loads of them are on Team GB. So there, more people probably collectively know about that team than they do the actual individual teams where they then go and play at. So you've got the likes of a really popular goalie called Ben Bounds, who plays for the Cardiff Devils. He's an amazing goalie, but people know him because he's a GB goalie. And Liam Kirk, who Finn mentioned, is the most recent British player to make it to be drafted to the NHL. And he hasn't made it into the show yet, but he's playing in Peterborough on the farm team of, who are they?
Arizona Coyotes.
Sorry, Coyotes.
Okay.
So yeah, there's been, and I mean, we looked this up too, about English players that have made it to the NHL.
So did we, and it's so small, and like none of them are even truly like none of them really like grew up playing in the UK. They sort of are just born there and then they moved to Canada, most of them.
Yeah, and so there's real weirdnesses around how many, quote unquote imports that you can have on a pro team here. And that's sort of gone back and forth. That pendulum has swung back and forth. So somebody knew, so there've been periods in hockey here where they knew to attract the top talent that weren't already playing in pro leagues in North America or something. They had to let imports into the league. So you'd have teams that were, you'd have a team like Oxford, for example, who's a couple rungs from the top, who would be, mainly Swedes and Finns and Czechs and stuff like that. And then maybe one or two British players in there. And so they've tried to swing it completely the other way now. And they've made it so I think that you can only have like one or two imports on the whole team.
Yeah, it's really small now.
And the idea is to try and bring back building grassroots hockey here.
Yeah.
Because of course, if you only ever hire imports into your pro leagues, you're never building up the grassroots at the bottom, because there's no aspiration and motivation for young people to try and get to the top. So it's gone really back the other way. And now there's a real grumble here that the game's not, it's not fast enough and not tight enough and everything else, because it's a purely British game now.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes time
Makes
to
sense.
get that speed and get it going. So correct me if I'm wrong, but there's only one current NHL player, Brendan Perlini, who's from the UK. He's the only one. And then as I started digging in my research, his older brother Brett was drafted in 2010 by the Ducks, and then he played in the ECHL, but he's now on the GB team and the Nottingham Panthers.
Yep.
But like, does that make him more popular there because he's got like, oh, he played like in the NHL and like, and his brother plays, or do they just not care? Like it's not as popular as you're saying, so there's not as much clout around him.
I'm sure that if you're really into hockey here, then you will have heard of the Pelini brothers kind of thing. And especially if you follow the NHL, because here GB Ice Hockey sometimes put out like highlights of Brendan whenever he makes something cool. So he scored a hat trick last season with the Hawks, I think. And that was quite a big story around all of my hockey friends here. And but other than that, unless you really know, it's not really a big thing. I mean, I went to a GB run hockey camp kind of thing with a guy who used to work for GB or something. And when we were doing like, it's like kind of like, I don't know what you call it, like a lecture kind of thing. We watched we watched the GB team play in like this really big game that they had to play in to qualify for the World Championships. And one of the big guys there was Brett Perlini. And that's really one of the main reasons I know about him personally, because I watched film on him when I was doing a camp here. But I, unless you're really into hockey and you've seen these kind of things, you wouldn't really know who he is, because he's just kind of another guy, unless you, again, follow Nottingham or something like that.
Here's another really funny thing that this reminds me of. And that is that Finn and I went to a GB game last year, and they're playing in Coventry against Dinamo Riga, and which is, where are they from? Latvia?
Latvia, and they
Latvia, I think.
KHL.
And so this is a World Cup qualifying match. And so the hilarious thing is that this is one of the bigger rinks in the UK, right? And so we got tickets to go along. And so it's Team GB in GB against Latvia, essentially. And the place was packed with Latvians. And then there was a tiny little section of British people that we sat in. And the Latvians were just fantastically lovely, but they were fanatical about hockey, in a way that you would expect, any Leafs fan or Hawks fan or anybody else who are like fanatical about it. They were fanatical, and they filled the rink. And these are all Latvians that are living in the UK, but because they're from a hockey country, they totally know the sport, right? And they filled the rink. And so I remember sitting there with Finn and thinking, this is just such an illustration of the problem with hockey in GB, is that here's the national team playing, they qualified for the Worlds, and there were probably 1/8 of the population in the rink in GB were GB people, and the rest of them were Latvians. But it was a great night too, and we won. But it gives you an idea of how marginal it is. And so even these guys that are famous and from here, and such a small number of them that make it and go to hockey, when they come back within their own club, unquestionably they're like godlike. Right. But
general public, no,
it's just this tiny little hockey bubble that would know about that team and follow that team, and they'd be amazingly popular within that bubble. But otherwise, no one has any idea who they are.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Well, I wanted to circle back and ask Finn, here, I think, minor league and anybody who kind of plays, club or just any kind of hockey, you look up to a player in the NHL. Yeah. Is it the same over there? Like, do you look up to a player who plays for, the Steelers, or do you ultimately end up, looking up to someone in the NHL, or in like your friends, do they do the same?
Yes, so most people here and me myself is that we will always look up to someone in either North America or in the NHL, just because of the lack of kind of like people knowing about the sport here. So obviously, I look at people like Brett Perlini or Liam Kirk, and I'm like, I'd love to be that good, like even just to play on like an elite league team here. But ultimately, you always end up going to thinking about like an OHL player in Canada or an NHL player like Sidney Crosby. And most of my friends kind of think of the same, and the people who I played with think of the same kind of thing, and they're always aspirational, or they're inspired by players who play in Canada or mainly play in the NHL.
Nice. So who's probably like your idol?
My idol is Mitch Marner. He plays for the Leafs, but
That's right.
I followed the London Knights before I followed properly the Leafs.
So Patrick Kane?
Actually, it was just after Patrick Kane. So Mitch Marner was in his final season of the London Knights, just been drafted by the Leafs, and I properly got into it because you went to Canada, and he went to a game and bought me a jersey and a puck and stuff. And then I was like, oh, this is the team I'm going to follow now, because I didn't really properly follow the Maple Leafs. And so I followed them through the whole season and through their Memorial Cup win, which was amazing. And that was like my first season of properly following a team. And I followed Mitch Marner, and then he got drafted by the Leafs. And so that just solidifies my love for the Maple Leafs there as well. And I just love Mitch Marner.
Yeah, Mitch is probably my favorite Maple Leaf as well.
I'm a Matthews guy myself.
Yeah, you're rocking his jersey.
But
how do you like Matthew's mustache? Important questions.
I just sort of love what's happening with the young guys in the NHL at the moment, how they just sort of like adopted this sort of cheesy 70s persona and whatnot. You see loads of them wearing ridiculously, you can tell, like insanely expensive suits, but like really tacky as hell and whatnot. Yeah. I just love what's happening with your sort of 20-year-olds in the NHL at the moment. I don't really get it, but clearly it's an in-joke between them, you know, and you see it across teams as well. It's hilarious.
Yeah, well, I heard Matthews picked up his style from European, so he ultimately just copied that style over, and it suits him. It makes him look a little dirty, but it suits him.
Yeah, for sure. We did a little thing since the NHL shutdown has been on our podcast. We've just been talking hockey and trying to focus on some obscure teams and stuff like that, and just dig into them a bit. And so we looked at the FC Lions that he played for over in Europe, and yeah, it's really interesting that you know he definitely picked up some European style.
Yeah,
for sure. But just coming back really quickly to what you were saying about young people and who they, you know, sort of who they their idols are in hockey. One of the really weird things that I always find that's tough for Finn is that I grew up around Stratford in London, Ontario, in southwestern Ontario, and you know, not only did you play hockey for a minor league team, but usually every high school had a team as well. And so the guys that I played with were all my best friends and everything else. So you're just always together and you love talking and everything else. Finn goes to a high school here of 1,500 students, and he's the only one that plays hockey, and he's the only one that even really knows anything about hockey.
Oh, that's so sad.
He's got me though.
You poor, yeah, he's got you at least, and this podcast. I get it. At least you've got an outlet somewhere, but that sucks. That's like a totally different way of coming up in the sport. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, were you going to say something? It's like everybody else, of course, has their favorite soccer player or whatever else, and they'll blabber away for that forever. But if you're a hockey fan here or a hockey player, and you're a young guy in the minor leagues, chances are you don't hang out with anybody else who plays or really gets it, you know. Yeah. So it's just a real weird cultural difference.
Well, you could talk to us about it anytime you want, Finn. Just, you know, geek out with Breezy on Marner's goals and like all of his sick plays. Like, we'll be here. We're here for you. Okay.
Absolutely.
Therapy group.
Yes. Hockey therapy group right here.
Well, it has to be kind of hard, you know, being the only one in high school playing, because I mean a lot of it is bonding with your team, and if you're not able to kind of have that atmosphere, I mean it has to make playing a little bit harder maybe. I mean, how does that kind of transition over?
So when I see my teammates, and I'm friends with all of them, as anyone would if you play with them in North America. But I see my teammates like for 1 to 3 hours a week, depending if we have a game or not. And we only, and with ice time, we only train like once or twice a week, and twice a week is very, very rare. But yeah, so like with the kind of team bonding, I hear stories of like people going out and they live near each other, or they go to school together. And so anytime they have any free time, they'll usually go to each other's house, and one of them will have a goal or something, and you'll just play hockey for ages, and you'll be able to talk about hockey with someone. But here, it's just not really the same. And that 1 hour that I have a week with the people I actually play with is kind of a thing where you always want to kind of get to training early so you can kind of talk with all those people about hockey. And even some of them aren't super into it and are like completely into soccer or football here, and they end up talking about that instead. And it's literally even within the people who play here and the kids who play here, like there's still a very small amount of them who are genuinely into hockey or really like follow a team in the NHL.
It's like where I grew up. I don't know about you guys, what the sort of communities that you grew up in, but I grew up in a small town, but it was like the hub for a huge rural area. And so when I went to high school, kids were bussed in from far away, you know, from all over the place. And the trouble with that is that when 3 o'clock came or whatever and school was out, everybody piled on their bus and went home. And you lived too far away to even hang out at night or anything else, you know. And that's sort of the life of so much of North America, where there's these towns or rural areas where you're just pals sort of at school. And it reminds me sort of that, of course, because the rinks are few and far between. So to support a minor league team, they've got to pull kids from a huge geographical area to get enough of them to come and play. And so it's very difficult for them to even get together outside of hockey.
Yeah,
but you guys got WhatsApp and things. We didn't have WhatsApp when I was a kid.
Yeah, right? That's true.
We have like a WhatsApp group or something, which sometimes people post in, you know. And it's kind of the only other thing that we can have to talk hockey, even if people end up doing that.
Right. Yeah, I was up in Toronto a couple months ago, back in January, and I ended up doing a photo shoot with someone. He played for the Steelheads, Mississauga Steelheads. And so I spent, it was probably like 4 hours at their rink, and they were having some like Olympic figure skating thing competition going on. But there were like 7 sheets of ice. We had 1 sheet, but they were also doing practice later that day. And then on the other sheets of ice, there was people doing stick time and practicing. But there were so many people in the rink, and out here, like, you see a lot of people, but there's nothing like the amount of people coming in and out of those doors up in Canada. So that was cool to see.
For sure. Here, I mean, this comes back to what we were saying in the beginning about ice, availability to ice. And so this is one of the things that we talk about on our podcast a lot, and that is, in the UK, a private citizen cannot hire the ice, full stop, at all, ever. Right. So if you wanted to, let's say Finn and I we both play with a different team, and we wanted to just rent the ice for an hour to just work on some skills or whatever, it is literally impossible. You cannot do it. It can't be done. There are rules and regulations that prevent any private citizen from even if you could get it. And so first of all, there isn't an hour of ice available to get. So these rinks are few and far between. So
why do they have those rules though? That's like stifling the sport there.
I think so.
What is their logic behind that? Like, they want to keep the ice, they don't want to pay, but if you're paying for the ice time, that pays for the upkeep, right?
So if you can imagine that with very few rinks, that any rink could easily rent that rink out by the hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, easily. And so the demand for ice time is huge. And then they have regulations around that. So if you wanted to play hockey and just practice, you have to have a level 2 coach on the ice. Every player has to be insured and registered with the league and all these other. And so what it adds up to is that it is literally impossible, even for we're both league players. We can't ever hire the ice here. And so we were back in Canada in January ourselves. Went to my sister lives not far from Toronto, and so we were sort of based around there. And almost every day that we were there, we just hired the local rink because we could,
Right.
you know, and it was like $50 to hire a huge, like, you know, 2,000, 2,500 seater rink and that sort of thing. And you know, when we were just blown away, Finn was blown away. Like the Zamboni guy would be there, like, "Hey, do you want me to flood the ice before you go on?" We're like, "We don't really care."
Right. You're like, we're just
care.
thankful we have freaking ice to get on and do all of the things.
Yeah, for sure. So when we see people on Instagram and stuff like that, that you'll see people doing like skills and trying to encourage other people, and they'll be like on a rink by themselves doing drills and things like that. I'm just thinking, you know, that is just literally impossible here. Totally impossible.
Wow. I had no clue that that was such a challenge there. And I mean, forgive me, I don't really know the geographical landscape of the UK, but from what I do know, I don't think there's a whole lot of ponds per se that freeze over, except up in the far north, like you said, and due to the global warming, as we were talking about at the beginning. So you can't even just like go in your backyard and hop on some ice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Finn, in your lifetime, how many winters do you remember where the water froze over enough that you could skate on it?
I don't.
Zero. Zero is the answer. So it doesn't really go below zero here.
Wow.
And so certainly, I mean, we might get some freak weather spell where it dipped below zero for 2 days or something like that in a row, but certainly never cold enough, long enough to freeze even a puddle really to skate on here. So that's just not a thing. No, you can't have an ODR here. You know, there's just no skating at all. So it's really tough, right? So as a young person here, and you know, sort of speaking for Finn here, as a young person, your opportunity to skate is 1 hour a week with one team, and that's it. And you got to get good. And so roller hockey is a really big thing here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Finn, so like what else do you do to keep up your game and to practice? I'm sure you practice with your dad in your yard or whatever, right? And with some outdoor things. Like, so what do you do?
So a couple years ago, just after Christmas, I, you know, as a normal kid would, I got a bit of money together. So I ended up buying like a synthetic ice tile, like a meter long thing. And then we also, we have a sports screen as well. We had a sports screen sent over by Sports Screen, which is great. So that comes over our garage door, and it has like a goalie on it. So we take out the synthetic ice, and we got a few pucks as well. So we just kind of shoot on that. And but other than that, we have a goal as well. But other than that, there's not really much we can do. And then if you have roller skates as well, obviously you can try and practice skating on there. But I played roller hockey for 2 seasons, and it's just not the same at all. Like you just can't get it exactly the same.
The hilarious thing about is roller hockey as well. It's like Finn's been fanatical about hockey for since he was a little kid, well, proper little kid, and and so he practiced, and you know, and this bit reminds me of my own childhood, and that was he was just on the driveway with a full-size goal, ripping thousands and thousands and thousands of pucks, and he learned to skate on rollerblades rather than on ice skates because we couldn't get him to the ice and whatnot. Finally found a roller team in a league that was looking for new players. And so the first night I took him along to training and whatnot to practice, and they played a scrimmage or whatever. And after it was over, they're like, "Yeah, we totally want you on the team. Like, how long have you been playing?" And he's like, "This is literally the first game I've ever played."
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was straight on to a team the first time he ever skated with a team.
Bravo! All that practice since you were little in the yard and stuff has paid off then, clearly.
Yeah, it was good. And like as we said here, I literally started from being able to shoot a puck and a ball without even having like roller skates or anything. I was able to shoot a puck or a ball since I was like 4 years old. And then it took, I think, what was it, like my 12th birthday, I asked for inline skates. So I got those, and I played outdoors with like a guy who would like set up these outdoor things, which was a complete niche thing. And like outdoor hockey is not a thing. And he was like one of the only guys in the country that does this kind of thing. So like once every 1 or 2 weeks, I'd go down to this thing and I'd play a bit. And then finally I ended up going and playing with like an actual team. for the first time, and yeah, obviously I did okay.
We moved into the neighborhood that we live in now. We moved to a little town outside of Oxford, and every time we're out on the driveway playing hockey with a goal with a net out and everything, somebody from our own neighborhood stops and they're like, "What is this? You know, what are you guys doing?"
What is this?
And we had
These
a great photo of a great picture of moving day when we moved to this town, and we had all these sticks lined up against the house. When we were moving it, haven't moved them into the garage yet, and there's a couple canoe paddles and whatnot there too. And I took this picture, and it's like, you know, and the caption's like, "Oh shit, some Canadians have moved into town."
That's awesome. I got to see that photo. That's funny.
Yes, I mean,
so
go ahead, Breeze.
I was just gonna say, so obviously it's a lot different in the UK than it is over here. Would you say player salaries probably, I mean, definitely aren't the same, but what would you say like the normal salary is for a player in the leagues out there?
I'm gonna say in the elite league, which is the top league here, it's barely enough to really keep someone going. I don't know the exact figures, but it's really little. And if you as you go down the leagues, like you see imports and other players, they play hockey, but they also have to have a job on the side as well to be able to sustain that kind of living and stuff.
I'd say I mean, I don't know the exact figure of what they make, but I can guarantee that you cannot live off the money of being even in the elite league. You would have to have another job. So when you think about, I think about great movies like Slapshot and stuff like that, where those guys all had another job. Or think about Miracle, where those guys all had, you know, they weren't pros, they all had proper jobs and things. It's like that here. There's no way you could survive off the money of being a pro hockey player here. And even
That's
things
crazy.
like when it comes to imports, they're really limited for imports because they don't even have most teams don't even have a house to put them up in and things, you know.
Wow.
So if you think about want to try and get you over from like Czechoslovakia or something like that to play, they don't even have a place to put you up. So by the time that, you know, you knock off your rent and whatnot, and the UK is really expensive to live in anyway, and you'd be living on like, you know, you probably couldn't even eat on the money that you'd be making.
Wow.
But
So
they still train and play just as much. I mean, obviously there's not as many teams, but they still have to stay in shape and stay, you know, working with their team. So you got to figure the hours that they're putting in are probably just as equivalent as what they do over here. So to have a job as well as practice and play, I mean, those players got to be pretty tired.
Yeah, for sure. It's got to be pretty tough. It's got to be pretty tough to be a pro hockey player here and make ends meet for sure. Which is also why you tend to see a lot of older players here that have been, you know, made their way, trickled down from the NHL, or, you know, got drafted at some stage and never actually made it into the show, never made it off out of the farm leagues, and then sort of trickled down out of that. And lots of them end up in the UK leagues, but now you're like 35, 38 years old and stuff like that, you know. And
which
so
is
they
like
have another,
ancient in the NHL. They're like,
or
what?
any,
You know?
or any
Yeah.
professional sport, right? But you know, and so they obviously have a whole other life going, whether they're a coach or a personal trainer, or, you know, or whatever other life they have that's subsidizing their life as an ice hockey player. You know?
Are there any weird mascots there? You know how Gritty in the NHL is like sort of taken over as far as like true character and this like next level like element of watching the sport for the Flyers. Do you guys have any weird, do they have mascots for the teams?
Yeah. I don't know that. Well, I think some of them do for sure. So Cardiff are called the Cardiff Devils, so that they've got like the sort of devil guy character. But I think the nearest to like a Gritty is actually the Glasgow Clans mascot, who's called Clangus.
What does that even mean?
So what is he?
Well, I would say so. It's a really, you know, a standard men's first name in Scotland is Angus.
Yes.
And so they call him Clangus, but he's like, I don't even know what he is. Like sort of like Gritty, which is an unidentifiable creature. Clangus is like a half bull, half arty animal. I don't know even know what he is, but I seem to love him. Clangus.
That's funny.
Google it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
I think that's sort of like all of our main questions about everything. We're going to do some of our wrap-up questions, unless you had some more for more stuff you wanted to ask us about.
Nah, we'll save some of it for another time. We'll jump on with you guys again.
Yes. So we usually ask like a handful of quick rapid fire questions at the end with all our guests. So who is your favorite hockey hunk?
Hockey hunk.
You go.
Right. Okay.
I gotta think.
So you're literally asking me who I think is the most attractive hockey player?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
It could be off of skills as well.
I don't mind identifying an attractive hockey player. But I'm still gonna stick to the likes of Leafs. I think that being a follically challenged guy like myself, I'm gonna say someone like William Nylander, who still has a proper hockey flow going.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Leafs as well. I can't think of anyone else off the top of my head, but I was gonna go with someone like Kasperi Kapanen because again, he is like a great flow and everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's muscly as well. So
there you go.
He is.
What about hockey lady? Who's your favorite hockey lady? It could be like.
Do you know, that's a great question, and if we jump on with you guys again sometime, we'll get into talking about women's pro hockey here too.
Yes, because there is a league, right?
There is a women's elite league here too, and we're huge fans of women's hockey, especially since things exploded at the All-Star event last year with Kendall Coyne and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We've been massive fans, and so so there's a couple hockey ladies here that I really like that I should shout out, like Rachel Cartwright and Saffron Allen. But someone that you guys would know, I would say definitely it'd be like, Kendall Coyne. Mm-hmm. God, she's cute and fast as lightning.
Yeah, it's the same thing here. Obviously, Rachel Cartwright, huge fan. She's a really good player. Same Saffron Allen. But I'm gonna say Marie-Philippe Poulin because she is just so good. I watched I watched 2 games when she played for Calgary, I think maybe. Before the CWHL collapsed, but she's so good, and she was also recently in the NHL voting thing with the players. She was voted the best women's player, and she's just so good.
And quick before I forget, I'm also going to say Hillary Knight because I saw a video of her a couple days ago, and she's like doing press ups on a stack of Red Bull cans or something. And she is so strong. I mean, she's an amazing player, but she's so muscly as well. I just looked at her and thinking that woman could literally kick the shit out of me.
Yeah. That's funny. Now, last question would be, do you have a favorite arena? Could be anywhere. Yeah,
definitely. You go, Finn.
Yeah, I mean, so when we came to Canada, we watched the London Knights and we watched the Maple Leafs. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna say Scotiabank Arena. I know it's the Leafs again, but it's the one arena I've been to, and it is huge, and the atmosphere in it is so great. And Leafs Nation is amazing, and when you have it there, everyone's just all good with each other, and like all the chants and everything. It's like literally you walk in there and everyone's saying hi, and no one there, and everyone comes up and says hi and stuff. It's just great, and it's probably the best rink that I've been in, especially.
And I'm gonna go. So I would have said that too. But I'm going to go for my hometown rink, which is the Allman Memorial Rink in Stratford, Ontario, which is where I did a lot of my playing and played some of my best hockey, which, believe me, wasn't that great anyway. But it's the Allman Memorial Arena in Stratford, Ontario, home of the Stratford Culletons, now the Stratford Warriors. A great hockey town. NHL players through there, the likes of Eddie Olchuk and Tim Taylor, and originally way back to like Howie Morenz and in vintage historic hockey, and also home of Justin Bieber.
Yes, it is.
The Biebs.
Why we know that?
Oh, I'm a believer. Don't worry, I'm good.
Yeah. So somehow in this great world, when people meet me over here in Europe, and they're like, "Where are you from?" and I'm like, "Canada," and they're like, "Oh, whereabouts in Canada?" and you're sort of like, "Well, how well do you know Canada?" And it's like, well, I'm from a little town of like 20,000 people, and they're like, oh yeah, where? And I'm like, a place called Stratford in Ontario, and they're like, oh my God, Justin Bieber. So yes, we are from the same place.
Yeah. And you're like, no, I don't know him. No,
yeah, I don't know.
I cannot. I mean, you don't, right?
Although he plays hockey, right? And so
Yeah.
he has sort of a standing place. I've seen this weirdness where I think he's like still signed on with the Warriors or something, and if he's in town, he at least skates with them at practice, if not in the game.
Isn't it nice what money can buy you?
Indeed, indeed.
I mean, he's a pretty decent player. I've seen some footage of him on the rinks here, and he'll play like some of the pickup leagues in LA. And you know, he's challenged Jordan Binnington, the goalie for the Blues, to a shootout competition, which obviously is postponed at the moment. But he's friends with Tyson Barrie and with Matthews
and Marner.
He was just doing he just interviewed Matthews this weekend. I happened to catch it on Instagram, whenever this is going to air, a couple weekends ago on Instagram Live. Like, Bieber's just shooting the shit with Matthews. Like, it's a weird time we live in, where that's
so the one thing I say about Justin Bieber is that he, you see so many celebrities and especially like singers and entertainers and whatnot, the likes of Drake and people like that, who sort of latch on to a particular team and a sport and everything like that. But Bieber's a hockey guy. The reality is he's the real deal. He was an actual hockey guy. He grew up in a hockey town, and he plays. He's a handy player.
I'm leaning more towards I'm a Bieber hockey related fan. I think so far his behavior is good for the sport. I don't think it detracts from the sport. Like that whole nonsense with Drake in the NBA finals where he was like on the sideline, like yelling at players, like, no. Like Bieber can be up in his box with his wife cheering, and like, he can be friends with Matthews. He's not like making the sport yucky. Like, I think Drake was making, the NBA is, anyway, in my opinion. So like, go ahead, keep ruining it. But I don't think that was helping it. So
I actually, the last time the Leafs were in LA, I went to the game and I was in a box and Bieber was sitting in the box right above me. And I was like,
oh, that's awesome.
It was cool.
When we went
I knew he was there, and I was like, well, it was a good thing I'm wearing my Leaf stuff because now I can be friends with him. So I'm like, how am I supposed to accidentally make it to his box? It didn't work, but
when we went to the Leafs game in Canada, it was completely ironic that Justin Bieber was also at the game that we went to as well, in the box, and it panned up to him on the big screen and stuff, and it was just kind of weird because we talk about him on our podcast, and we're talking about him right now and this kind of thing, and he just like fully announced that he was in with the Leafs and stuff, and the pictures of like Matthews and that lot. But he was in the game that we went to too, and it was great.
All roads lead to Justin Bieber, apparently.
I love that.
I don't know. So since you were talking about the podcast, why don't you tell everybody the name, where they can follow you on both the podcast and social media, and then like maybe give us a little preview of what they can expect when they tune in, both pandemic style and non-pandemic style.
Well, maybe I'll tell you a bit about the podcast, and Finn will tell you how to find us and all that sort of stuff. And so we're the UK Hockey Fan Podcast, and the whole angle. I mean, you guys have a brilliant podcast, by the way, and we love it. We've been listening to it, and
Thank you.
But it's a good thing, but it's a busy field, and there's some other great podcasts out there like Steve Dangle podcast that we like, and Spit and Chicklets and stuff like that. And so we wanted to try and get a different angle onto things, and for us, our sort of angle on hockey is a Canadian father and son living in the UK, somehow trying to still be hockey fanatics in a culture that just doesn't get it at all, really.
Right.
And so a lot of the content for us is the sort of stuff that you'd hear on maybe your own podcast and some of the others. So, NHL news and stuff that's happened this week. And we try and cover the UK leagues. And like we mentioned before, we're trying to have a real focus on women's hockey and that sort of thing. But we'll just talk about hockey memories and we'll dig out facts and stories from the vaults about hockey and that sort of thing as well. But really our angle is, how do you be a big hockey fan and a hockey player in a country that just doesn't really get it?
You guys are figuring out, right?
Yeah, that's it. And so we, we're lucky enough that the stats tell us that our podcast at the moment, as of last checking, reaches people in 55 different countries, and somehow we're finding other families that are, probably loads of expat North Americans, I would guess, and stuff like that, who are, for whatever reason, living in a place that doesn't get hockey, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just think that we're sort of connected with those people. And then more recently, since the shutdown's been on, we've just been, we've asked our listenership to just send us in stuff on social media that they want us to talk about. And we've opened it up to say, we'll talk about any team anywhere. And so we're doing a special short shutdown series at the moment. And we've talked about NHL teams, and we've talked about kids minor league teams in the middle of Scotland. And anybody that has a team, we'll get on the old Google, find out everything about your team, and we'll talk about you on our podcast, because what else is there to do? But anyway, so we're easy to find. Finn, how do you find us?
Yeah, so we are UK Hockey Fan on most social media platforms, so Instagram and Twitter. We have a website, ukhockeyfan.co.uk. We have a YouTube channel, which is also UK Hockey Fan Podcast. And we also...
Where can they actually get the podcast from?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say. So you can get us on any place which you can find a podcast, so Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. And we also have our own email as well, so ukhockeyfan@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for enlightening us and our listeners all about everything UK hockey. There was so much that is different, but also there's a lot that's the same. And I think that same thing is just the love of the sport.
Thanks for having us on, guys. It was great to have a chat.
Thanks for coming over to our House of Hockey podcast and hanging out with us. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And in the meantime, you can follow us on social media. Just look for House of Hockey podcast. We'll be back next week.